Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we're going to continue on with managing the score manager. We are going to look at some other functions within the instrument list panel of the score manager. So we're going to get to our score manager instrument list, and we're going to be looking at some of these things in the bottom right-hand corner, the staff attributes for our instruments, okay? And to point out, as you select your different instruments, the data down here in the bottom right corner will change to the appropriate settings for each instrument that Finale will populate automatically. And you notice that if I select the piano, it's all grayed out. That's because you need to select a certain staff within the piano. And to do that, you just open that little triangle right there next to the name. And if you two rows will open up, and if you select the top one, treble, bottom one, bass clef. All right, so that's how that works. The first part of this bottom right corner here is the notation style. And there's three options: standard, percussion, and tablature. Now, percussion and tablature notation are a whole other ball of wax, and they're deserving of their own tutorials. So I will spend time in later videos discussing both of those notation styles. Okay. Below that, we have color note heads, and just as an illustration, I'm going to select my flute line here, which I have some notes in the flute, and I'm going to check color notation, and you'll notice that if I zoom in, that all of the notes change to colors depending on the pitch. And these colors, by the way, are printable. If you have a color printer, these colors will print. So that's how that works. And of course, if you hit settings, you'll open up the document options, notes and rest, and you can set these pitches to whatever color you want. Just click on one and choose your color appropriately. Show border will put a little black border around the note, and of course you can reset the colors if you end up not liking it. I believe these colors are a standard set of colors used on educational instruments. I believe there's an educational percussion instrument that are, the bars are colored, these colors so that kids can learn pitches that way. I believe that's what that's used for, and I believe those are the standard colors. Of course, somebody can chime in and tell me otherwise if that's not the case. So there's your colored note heads. Transposition. Now this is where you'll find the transposition, and Finale will, when you add an instrument, will put in the appropriate transposition for each instrument. Okay. And in the case of the tenor sax, for example, we have B flat up a major ninth, add two sharps, and treble clef. So that means that it's also setting the treble clef for the instrument in its transposed state. All right. Now there's a couple things I want to show you. Finale gives you a list of transpositions, of standard transpositions here, but there are a couple cases where you might need to create a custom transposition. I'm going to show you two of them right now, which I think might be useful to some people. I've got two piccolos here. For the first one, there is a historical piccolo that's in the key of D flat, and if you happen to be writing for music that has that D flat piccolo, you're going to want to put your piccolo in the appropriate transposition. However, Finale doesn't have a D flat transposition standard in its set of transpositions, so we're going to have to create one. And how you do that is you go to Other, and the staff transposition window appears, and this is how we're going to customize our transposition. Now, the down octave transposition is already set for the piccolo, that's standard, and you have interval and key alter. Interval is going to be the interval in which the transposition is made. So in the case of the piccolo, it's down 7, and it goes by pitch class, not by semitones. So think C to B to A to G. It doesn't matter if it's B flat or A flat or G flat or whatever. So C down to B, A, G, F, E, D, C is -7, okay? Now for a D flat piccolo, we're going from the concert key of D flat to the written key of C. So we're actually going from D flat to C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, which is 8. So this interval is going to be 8. And of course, negative numbers mean down, positive numbers mean up. The key alter, the way that this field works, is that if you enter a positive number here, you're adding sharps to the key signature. If you add a negative number to this field, you're adding flats to the key signature. Now, in the case of the D flat piccolo, we're going from the concert key of D flat to the written key of C. So we're actually going to be adding 5 sharps to cancel out the 5 flats in the original key signature. So this key alter value will be +5, all right? And we're always going to want to simplify key, and I'll show you why in a second, all right? So we click OK, and now my second piccolo is in the a D flat transposition. So the song itself is in D flat. The transpose instrument is in the key of C, and you see how that works. And you notice the other key signatures are transposed appropriately. By the way, if I were to go back here and unselect simplify key, what happens is you get these crazy key signatures because we're adding, remember, we're adding 5 sharps. So you're adding 5 sharps to the key of B major, and you get this weird 10 sharp key signature. I'm sure there are some legitimate theoretical uses for something like that, but generally speaking, in practical terms, we're always going to want to simplify that key, and that will basically wrap the key around to the most logical key signature. Okay, so that is how that works. And there's one other, actually, before I go on to that, I just want to point out there is another type of transposition that you can do called a chromatic transposition. Now, basically, what this will do, actually, let me find this in a different instrument for you. Let's look at the second clarinet for a second. You can do a chromatic transposition. So if you select that, now I've got B flat up major second, and what it will do is make that transposition without changing the key. So if we look at my second clarinet now, we retain the concert key of E major, but the pitches get transposed into the appropriate places, just like my clarinet. My normally transposed clarinet, the pitches are the same, but the key signature is not. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure of why you'd want to do that, but I'm sure somebody somewhere has a reason to do that, and that is how you would do that. The other transposition I wanted to show you, just because this comes up a lot in the forums, is the specific case where instruments get transposed into the key of F sharp, and that's why I have this set up at the beginning in the key of E, and my clarinets are put in the key of F sharp. And occasionally you get passages like this where you have this G sharp major scale with the F double sharp and the B sharp, and it's not exactly the prettiest thing to look at, and maybe the rest of your music tends to favor raised accidentals, and the key of F sharp just doesn't work as well as the key of G flat would for the clarinet. So I'm going to show you how to put a transposing instrument into the wrong key, as it were. In this case, G flat for this second clarinet. All right, so I've got my normal transposition reset. We're going to go to Other, and it'll populate with the way that it's normally transposed. B flat, add 2 sharps, right? Simplify key. So the interval is 1. That makes sense. We're going from E to F. It's just one interval. But in our case, we want to go from E to G flat. And again, it's by pitch class, not by steps. I know E to G flat is really just a major second, or actually technically a diminished third. So the interval here is going to be 2, because we're going to E, F, and G. So interval 2. Now the key alter, if we think about this, we want to go from the key of E major all the way down to G flat, right? So we're going to add 4 flats to eliminate the 4 sharps in the key of E major, and then 6 more flats to get to the key of G flat. So this key alter value is actually going to be -10. Okay, and of course we always want to simplify key as we have it here, right? So click OK, and this is how you would put a transposing instrument that gets into F sharp. This is how you would re-notate it in the key of G flat. All right, and you'll notice that later on in these other key signatures, it's just normal because you have that simplify key checked, and so it will put every other key signature in a normal key except for E major. It will give you the G flat transposition instead of the F sharp transposition. All right, it's a handy little thing to know how to do. I showed you the chromatic key changes. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you is the set to clef. So in our tenor sax instrument, if we go to Other, it'll just show you, it'll populate this field the way it's already set, and you'll notice that the set to clef is checked, and this the treble clef is selected. Now, obviously, in a tenor sax instrument in concert key, I'll just show you. Let me just change to concert key here, displaying concert pitch. You'll see that the tenor sax is put in bass clef, but in in transpose key, the tenor sax gets appropriately put in treble clef, and that's where that happens. There may be some instances. I was trying to figure out some examples of why you might want to change this set to clef for certain instruments. I haven't been able to think of a example offhand, but it is there if you need to do it. Okay. Below the transpositions is the high key signatures and show accidentals checkbox. Now, this is going to be useful in our French horn. In some traditions, the French horn gets notated without a key signature. I think in most orchestral instances, horns are written without key signatures, and in most band situations, they're written with key signatures. Finale, by default, adds a key signature for our horns. But it's easy to change. We just select the horn, check that box, and my horn 2 now has no key signature. The notes are there with the accidentals, but there's no key signature. All right. Below hide key signatures, we have our staff lines, and this is sort of a little bit self-explanatory. Most instruments are going to use a standard 5-line staff, but you'll see as in the triangle I have the 1-line staff, or Finale sets you up with the 1-line staff with full bar line, and you can change it to a shorter bar line. You could change it to a staff with no lines at all, or you can select other. And when you select other, this staff setup window appears, and there are all kinds of stuff that you can do. And this is another example of just the incredible flexibility that Finale has. This staff setup dialog box. Most people are probably never going to use this. First of all, I always use spaces. It seems to make more sense here. And if we select this, we'll get our 5-line staff back. There's all kinds of stuff you can do, including, changing the spacing between the lines if you want. You can extend the top and bottom bar lines past the staves and everything. These values here will change where the default position of the rests appear. See, I just moved my half rest. You can even change the position of the repeat dots if you so desire, and get something like that. Again, a lot of this stuff may not be all that useful, but I'm sure to somebody somewhere, changing these values is going to be useful, particularly for some avant-garde music. You could also change the basic number of staff lines if you want. Put 8 staff lines there if you really want. And what was the other thing? Oh, the stem reversal point. Could be useful in certain percussion instruments. You can kind of change where the stem reversal happens by default. All right. And even more customizable, if you click the custom staff radio button, all of this grid shows up, and you can deselect and then select all kinds of positions for staff lines. Again, I have never had a use for this, but I'm sure somewhere somebody that's doing some avant-garde music is going to need something like this. And this is just an example of, Finale's incredible flexibility. For now, we're just going to go back to the 1-line staff for our triangle. All right, so that is staff lines. Below staff lines, we have something called first clef, and that's basically what it is. It's a first clef appearing in the score. So for our triangle, we can click on that, and we can select the other drum set or percussion clef if we'd like. And we can also set, in the bassoon, for example, I've got these notes up in the upper register, and if I wanted to start in tenor clef, we could do that easily enough. All right. Now, there is something I want to point out. There's a difference between setting this first clef in an instrument that doesn't have a set to clef setting. Now, what does that mean? For example, the tenor sax, as I mentioned before, if we go down here, you'll notice that it has a set to clef. No matter what that first clef is set to, if I have set to clef checked, it will always set the transposed part to this clef. Okay, so what does that mean? So in my tenor sax part, well, first of all, I'm viewing transpose score, right? So let's go back to concert pitch so that everything's in the right key. And you notice that in this case, my tenor sax is displayed in bass clef. In some cases, you might want to put your tenor sax in this octave transposing treble clef. I know a lot of people like to see their tenor sax that way. And you'll notice that it puts that clef there in concert key. However, if we were to go back to non-concert pitch, you notice that goes away appropriately, and the tenor sax transposition gives you that normal treble clef. However, if we go and change the bassoon, now the bassoon doesn't have a set to clef setting in the transposition, right? So if we select our tenor clef again for the bassoon, now the tenor clef appears in both the transposed score and in the concert score, okay? So that it's something to be aware of. I feel like that's a very advanced feature that appears in an intermediate tutorial, but hey, that's what it is. Just be aware that you're setting your first clef can be different depending on whether or not the transposition has a set to clef setting like the tenor sax would. All right, and let me see. Did I hit everything? I just want to double check my notes. I think I've got everything that I wanted to touch on. So that's the next. This was the next tutorial for the score manager, and come back. We're going to take an advanced look at some of the playback functions in the instrument list. Will be our next tutorial. So, all right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.